Hello, everyone. I'm Sherry Rolfing, your host of the ACAP AI and Other Data Tools Showcase. I'd like to welcome you to our session today presented by the Zyter TruCare team. They're going to be discussing Agentic AI orchestration. Let's end transactional healthcare. But before I turn it over, I have a few housekeeping items. This session, along with all ACAP calls and webinars, will be held in accordance with the ACAP antitrust guidelines. These guidelines can be viewed on our website. We will record today's call and will post it and the slide deck on the Showcase website. Always remember, if your plan is seeking services, be sure to check out our list of preferred vendors, just like Zyter. Look at the top of our homepage and click on the Preferred Vendors link. You can also post a note or even an RFP on the Preferred Vendor Connection portal. During today's session, you can ask a question at any time by clicking on the Q&A icon in your Zoom window and typing it in. Now I'll pass it over to Sruthi to get us started.
Hey, it's nice to meet all of you. I'm Sruthi Madhavan. I'm a VP of Strategy and Transformation at Zyter TrueCare. My career has been focused on helping payers and providers to reimagine their operations to drive measurable outcomes. And at Zyter, I lead the AI-enabled transformation to not just talk about AI, but also really help payers and providers achieve the outcomes. I'm really excited to be here with my colleagues to talk about our vision and the strategy and the challenges that we see in the market and what we are really bringing to the table to solve this problem. Avikar, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone, nice to meet you all. My name is Avikar Govil. I started my career focusing on machine learning projects, statistics background, and that's kind of how I got interested in AI for the last couple of years, kind of working as a product manager, and then more recently directing some of the AI projects here at Zyter TrueCare. Very excited to present to you all today.
And then good afternoon, everyone. My name is Heather Thornton. I am a registered nurse, so I'm on the strategy and transformation team here with Sruthi at Zyter. I joined Zyter in October, but prior to joining Zyter, I spent the last 10 years at a large healthcare payer, working in various roles, but spent most of my time in their care management department. So very excited to be here today.
Okay, so we can quickly get into the agenda. So for the next 30 minutes, we are going to provide a quick overview of who we are and what we are doing to transform healthcare with AI. And we'll walk through some of the challenges, the vision that we have, and give you a typical, like, how do we reimagine the workflows? Heather is going to talk about it as a clinician. And then Avikar will walk through some of the AI use cases and the outcomes that we are really driving in the market. And we'll have the last 30 minutes focused on any of the questions that you all might have. So quickly getting into introducing who we are. So TrueCare, we have 44 million members on our TrueCare platform across 45 plus health platforms. So we serve payers, providers, managed service organizations, and other public health entities. We have deep expertise in government programs and commercial lines of business. And we have industry recognition across Forrester, recently on Everest, and also Gartner, that really emphasizes the strength of our solutions in the market. I'll walk you through our vision in a second. Right. So traditionally, TrueCare has been a population health management platform. We enable care management solutions, utilization management, and omni-channel capability. And in the last few months, we've been investing heavily and strategically in Agentic AI platform and also clinical services. So on the Agentic AI, we strongly believe that we are not going to look at a single task and figure out how to automate it, but we are going to look at end-to-end processes and automate the workflow with human and agents in the mix. So we've been thoughtfully crafting our Agentic AI platform. And along with that, we also have clinical and admin BPO services. We are going to close an acquisition in the next few weeks, and we are going to be NCQA accredited. So together with the platform, Agentic AI capabilities, and clinical services, we believe we can simplify operations and amplify the outcomes. And we have confidence in our integrated equation, and we are going to take risk upfront, try to deliver tangible outcomes for our clients. Looking at our product suite. So to match up with the vision, the Symphony platform, what it really entails is a combination of three things. The green circle that you see here is our Orchestrate platform. So think of it as an orchestration layer. The value proposition here is we are not enabling a single agent or two, but what it has is it coordinates multi-agent workflows. So you, at a real time, based on the real-time triggers and context, it can trigger the right agent to help orchestrate a workflow across systems, channels, tools. And on the right side, you can see the blue circle, which is our Collaborate platform. So integrating with the Orchestrate, it becomes a really powerful omni-channel capability. So the backbone of our Collaborate platform is a convergence platform, which is our branded platform that is actually used by Verizon's backbone. So 1 in 3 text messages go via that platform. So the combination of Orchestrate and Collaborate, we are able to orchestrate workflows, but also surface it across omni-channels for intuitive user experiences, be it like employees, providers, members. And tying it all together is our expert services, which is clinical and admin BPO, but we also provide transformation services because we believe it's not just a product that you implement to solve the problems, but it really needs effort and transformation to reimagine the current state operations to see how we can design the work in the first place with AI first thinking. And also right now, we can show you a demo of how this fits into our TruCare platform, right? Enabling UM and CM agentic workflows. But Symphony can also be a standalone platform that can integrate with any digital core. So it can sit on top of your existing legacy platforms, and without having to change much on your legacy platforms, you can enable automation on top of it to drive outcomes. The future state that we are really enabling with our offering, we can look at it as 3 different layers. So starting from the bottom, it is an interoperable digital foundation. Going to my point on, it can integrate with existing systems via API native integration, and it has built-in governance, auditability, and compliance, and it is very modular, and it can support integration to like all of the payer ecosystem systems and platforms. And then the second layer, which is really enabled by our Orchestrate platform, it helps drive modular orchestrated workflows, which has context-aware task routing, right? Real time, you can enable the right agent to orchestrate it. And the cool part is also, it really enables, clinician or human in the loop. So how can you have a hybrid set of agents and human operating together to solve a workflow? So that's our value proposition, and that's what we believe really drives outcomes. And then on the top is how can you have an intuitive AI augmented experience that really empowers anybody who is using the platform, anybody who might be getting information from it, like your members, providers, with intelligent real-time support. So it's dynamic UI surfaced with next best actions and guided workflows. I touched on this a little bit, right? We strongly believe that it's not just a product that you implement that is going to drive outcomes, but we have to reimagine and transform the work that goes along with it to make the outcomes really sustainable and measurable. The way we do it is with our recode methodology, and just walking through that, right? Like step by step, it's redefining or reimagining what work you will even do in the first place. If you automate current tasks, you're just going to automate chaos faster. So it's with AI first thinking, what should the work even look like in the future? And coming to how can you empower people to experience it better? So how do people experience it? How can you define that? And how do you configure who does the work? So if it is going to be a hybrid agent plus human, how do we define the who does the work in a way that we want agents to do some of the grunt work, but somebody like a clinician to really focus on the things that matter, and who takes the decision. And then orchestrate is how do you have all of these smaller pieces kind of work together as a workflow? And then if we have AI and human in the mix, your decision points, your governance, everything is going to change. So how do you help where the decisions are being made and how the decisions are being made to drive accountability, but also embedding confidence in the people who are using it and how we can measure performance as well as trust. And finally, how we can evolve over time, not just humans learning to adapt how to use AI, but also how does AI really learn and improve over time. So this is our methodology that we use to transform the work by applying our platform. I'm going to pass it over to Heather to start taking a real life example and walking through how we actually bring this transformation to life.
Yeah, so when we think about kind of the real cost of the manual work within the and CM platform, so as a clinician, I know firsthand that there's a lot of manual work within these flows. It's not uncommon for nurses to have to work across multiple different systems. They might have to hand off the member's care between social workers, behavioral health, and a lot of times those handoffs, they're not as smooth as they could be. They frequently have to outreach to providers, and it's really not uncommon for nurses to have to spend more time documenting than they actually do providing care to members. So when we see this manual work, we see that it really impacts the care outcomes, right? So we can see that decisions are sometimes delayed. Maybe we're missing our compliance windows. We might have readmissions that potentially we could have saved, but we're not able to just because of the fragmented systems that the clinicians are working in. There is frequent provider abrasion when we think about the nurses having to outreach them frequently, not having insight into what those nurses are doing, as well as the gaps in care coordination. And then obviously working in lots of different systems, spending a lot of time documenting does result in higher administrative costs because the nurses are having to spend a lot of time doing those manual things. So what we want to do is kind of get your thoughts. So we're going to start with our first poll question of today. So tell me, which outcome is your top priority in the next 12 to 18 months? Is it cost savings? Is it productivity gains? Improved clinician experience? Or enhanced payer and provider collaboration? We'd love to hear your thoughts on what your top priority is. We'll give everybody just a couple minutes to share your thoughts, and then we'll take a look at what the results are.
What is your top priority, Heather?
Oh, good question. I would say for me, definitely I'm a little bit biased, but I would say, I love the clinician experience piece, definitely wanting to improve the way that our clinicians do work. All right, so we've got some results. So what we're seeing is it's pretty even. So I think the highest priority is those productivity gains, very, very important. We're seeing a lot of cost pressures. Then we've got kind of a mix between cost savings and clinician improvement, taking that second, and then the enhanced payer and provider collaboration coming in last. But we still got 10%, so that's important. So the exciting thing is, what if I could tell you that you could achieve all of these outcomes at one time? So that's what we're doing here at Zyter TruCare. So the process flow that you're seeing on the screen is just one specific initial review process. So as you can see from here, this initial review process typically takes about 3 different people. It can take up to 90 minutes depending on how complex the case is. And what we've been able to do is reimagine this workflow by utilizing AI in order to surface summaries, provide clinicians with that information that they need directly in front of them, improving the collaboration between the nurses and the providers. And what we've been able to do is actually take this down to one person and doing this workflow within 15 minutes. Giving us an 84% productivity gain, a 30% cost savings, and really improving that provider collaboration. All right, so let's get into our second poll. So what do you feel is your biggest concern about enabling AI in clinical workflows? So is it the loss of clinician oversight, the lack of transparency, explainability, data bias or inequality, workflow disruption, added burden, or maybe you don't have any concerns? Give everybody a couple minutes. We're really looking forward to hearing your thoughts. I know AI is kind of it's a newer topic, especially when we think about healthcare. So I know there is a lot of, anxiety with using it. So. All right, so we've got our results in. So again, we're pretty even. So we've got the lack of transparency, explainability, bias, and inequality coming in at first. Then we've got the loss of clinician oversight. We have the workflow disruption, added burden. Not surprising, nobody picked no concerns. So as a clinician, I share in a lot of these concerns that folks have raised with AI-driven care, which is why at Zyter TruCare, we're really taking this very seriously by doing lots of different things in order to help build that clinician's trust. So some of the things that we're doing is we're always keeping that human in the loop. So we're not having AI making those decisions, but rather we're taking information from the member's medical record and surfacing it to the clinician in order to make that final decision. But the nurse is always in the loop, always has the final say, but we're just making it a little bit easier and quicker in order for them to be able to do that. In addition, we're also doing transparency and explainability. So really giving that clear rationale. We're surfacing the confidence calibration. So how confident are we in the specific AI recommendations, really giving the clinicians the feedback that they need in order to feel confident with the AI summarization that's happening. We do take fairness and inequality very seriously. So we are working very closely in order to make sure that we don't have the bias within our AI, and then really think it's important to set up a really good governance and accountability. So really establishing the clear ownership, what are the escalation protocols, and the compliance alignment, really to ensure that we're using AI in a responsible way, which I think is especially important in healthcare. So then I'm going to pass it over to Avikar, who's going to go through some clinical use cases.
Thanks, Heather. So some of the things we've discussed so far include the costs of manual work in UM and CM, and we've sort of lined up how Zyter's AI capabilities can help with these processes. So let's take a look at a more specific example, and we're going to dive deeper into the prior authorization continuum. So within UM, let's take a look at prior auth. So as Heather kind of mentioned, right, today prior authorizations are a heavily manual workflow. So what we've done is we sort of divide them up into three more discrete workflows here. So the first part of the process is the fax intake. So the authorization comes in, and typically someone like an intake coordinator will spend 10 to 20 minutes extracting all the information from an authorization request, and then they often input that information into a utilization management portal. From there, once they've submitted the authorization request, that typically goes over to a clinical review process. So a clinical expert, like a nurse, is responsible for reviewing that authorization, and often dozens of pages of clinical documentation or medical history, and they review that against a set of medical necessity guidelines. So that process can take anywhere from 20 minutes to 60 minutes, depending on the complexity of the case. Now, lastly, if you look at the RFI process, which can take 10 to 20 minutes for a nurse to essentially manually contact a provider's office to request additional information about the member, such as their latest clinicals or the physical exams or any kind of information like that. For each of these discrete steps, we can apply AI either through AI agents or AI voice agents to generate time savings. So for fax intake and clinical decisioning, AI benefits can be anywhere from 20% all the way up to 70% time savings while maintaining high accuracy for conducting that overall process. And for RFI, it could be anywhere from 20 to 40% time savings of a nurse's time. If we jump to the next slide, so let's jump into some more specific examples here. So as I mentioned, that first use case is around when the fax actually comes in. So here's an example of how AI can be applied. On the left-hand side, you see some dummy fax data that we've essentially mocked up. So let's say that an intake coordinator has received this fax. As you can see, I know it's a little blurry, but the fax is handwriting kind of all over it. Some of that handwriting's outside the boxes that are required to be filled out. And so a process like this, where typically an intake coordinator has to read through this form, verify that it's an authorization request, and then again, manually input that information into a portal, like what you see on the right-hand side, that can typically take 10 to 20 minutes. For this use case, you can essentially use AI to handle each of those processes, right? So you can use an AI agent to, one, verify that this is an authorization. You can use it to then extract all the key information from that fax. And lastly, you can map all of that information to a UM portal like what you see on the right. So again, like what you see on the right, you see all the boxes representing the key identifiers, and AI has basically automatically filled in those boxes using the training that we've done. And again, if this process typically takes 10 to 20 minutes, the AI can cut that time down by 50 to 70% and maintain that high accuracy when extracting the information and then inputting it into the portal. So if we jump to the next slide, just to extend this example, AI can continue to help with this overall process. So one thing that you see at the top here, right, is that the majority of authorizations even today run through some type of rules engine to automatically approve certain authorizations. So once this fax has come in, all the information has been submitted to the UM portal to create that authorization. AI is able to do a couple different things. One is it's generated the auth request. It's then providing a recommendation like what you see at the top to approve this request, along with its overall confidence score. So this is just based on the authorization type at this point, and it's typically based on a set of business rules. But again, as Heather mentioned, AI is simply providing this recommendation. It is not going ahead and submitting the request. It's basically saying, this is what I recommend with a high degree of confidence, but it's up to the human in the loop to essentially verify that information, validate it, and then go ahead and approve it if they agree with the AI recommendation. The other key portion here is that AI is also providing a summary of the fax request based on the information contained in the authorization request. And we also have the ability to use AI to summarize any supported clinical documentation. So again, those can often be dozens of pages of clinical notes or medical history. And so if the intake coordinator or the clinical reviewer just wants a quick set of notes about the case, AI is able to provide them that information in a matter of seconds up to maybe a couple of minutes. If we go over to the next slide, so the second use case where we'd mentioned we're applying AI is around the AI-supported clinical decisioning. So let's say the authorization comes in and the business rules essentially say, okay, this authorization requires further review. This is another area where we can apply AI to. So again, this process typically takes 20 to 60 minutes for a clinician like a nurse to manually go through the auth request and review against a set of clinical guidelines. But what we were able to do with the power of AI is cut that down by 20 to 40% of the time. And we're able to do basically a few different things. So one is based on the auth request that comes in, we will suggest the set of clinical guidelines that should be used to essentially review that case. The second thing is once we have identified those guidelines, we actually ingest them and turn them into a decision tree or some kind of checklist, essentially, of all the criteria that must be met to approve, deny, or escalate the decision for further review. And then lastly, what we do is we read through the patient's authorization, any supported clinicals, and any existing medical records, and we'll actually match that information against the checklist we created. What we'll then do is we'll offer a met or an unmet decision. So what you can see on that left-hand side in those blue boxes is AI is basically saying, okay, going through each of these checklist items, has this portion of the criteria been met or unmet? It'll provide that information to the clinical reviewer along with an overall recommendation for approve, deny, or escalate that decision. And again, the human will have the ability to make the final decision. Our goal is essentially to provide all the information quickly, accurately, and easily to the clinical reviewer. The reviewer ultimately will then validate all that information and make the final call. So what you see at the top right is the ability for that clinical reviewer to essentially approve, deny, or basically escalate the decision to someone like a medical director. If we jump to the next slide, again, this is just extending this example, but this is to show you on the left-hand side how we're able to essentially suggest the set of clinical guidelines that should be used to review the case. And then below that, how we create that decision tree or that checklist that we'll then use to review the case. On the right-hand side, you see how we're able to basically ingest the patient's medical records, and then use those and match them up against the checklist to provide that met or unmet decision. Now, if we jump to the next slide, which is taking a look at the final use case, this is actually a unique example where we're actually able to create an AI voice agent that essentially talks to the provider on the other end. So today, a nurse often has to call a provider's office on their own to potentially gather more information that might be missing from a patient's case. So that's a process that can typically take 10 to 20 minutes. Instead of waiting on hold or being transferred, a nurse can now let an AI voice agent handle the call and notify the staff about any missing information, like a patient's clinicals. So what it can also do then is the AI agent, the AI voice agent will actually stay on the line. And once that information is submitted by the provider staff, the AI voice agent will actually go in and confirm once that documentation is successfully uploaded. And what this really does is it frees up the nurse's time to handle a bunch of other tasks that might be, value additive, while the AI voice agent handles, a phone call like this. So that's what I've got. And yeah, happy to field any questions at this time.
All right, I've got a few questions from the audience. Can you share examples from health plan senior executives on how current market or homegrown AI solutions are not adequately addressing their financial or operational challenges?
Yeah, I can take that one, Sherry. I think there are a lot of different dimensions of pressures that health plan executives are facing currently, right? In terms of cost savings, both admin and medical cost. And while doing all of these things, how do we ensure that there is an intuitive experience for payers, providers, or everybody who's using the system in the ecosystem? And also focusing on like payer provider collaboration. So these are all of the things that we are hearing from different payer executives. And the challenge with point solution is, while an individual point solution could solve for something very specific in a very nice way, the experience that it enables is usually not cohesive. So what they're all looking for is like, hey, I have a lot of point solutions, but what is that one thing that ties all of these things together? And that's where we believe our value proposition with the Orchestrate platform. With that, we can bring in our agentic workflows, but it is also something that we can integrate with other point solutions in the market, but basically creating that marketplace of all of the solutions that we can surface in an intuitive user experience to our stakeholders.
Great, thanks. So can the AI voice agents navigate provider IVRs?
Heather, do you want to take that?
Sure. Yeah, I can take that. So yes, so our voice agents are intelligent voice agents. They are actually really good at navigating conversations, so they would be able to handle that.
I just wanted to add to that, right? So voice agents are completely customizable. So we have the capability, but then we work with our clients, and we call this last mile customizations. And we work with them to understand the use cases that they want to use these. It could feel like inbound calls in a call center setting or make outbound calls. And we want to make sure we are working with our clients to thoughtfully enable these voice agents so that, we don't want to, we want it to be empathetic, right? We don't want to call a provider with a voice agent. So we will help work with our clients to identify the right use cases where we can use a voice agent to minimize admin work, but we do not want that to replace the empathy that, a clinician might provide.
Oh, thank you. Is this NLP OCR requiring customer level configuration, or is it generic for all TruCare fax intake for auths? Also, how is it determining the inbound fax is an auth?
Yeah, I can take that. So to the first question around the customization, so there is some level of customization that typically is required and something that we enjoy working with clients on. The reason for that is, based on the authorization request specific to a client, certain phrases might be vary from client to client, and that needs to be mapped to the UM portal. So, basic example of that is one authorization might call it a patient, another one might call it a member. So we'll work with our clients specifically to understand those little nuances, and then we can then map it specifically to the Zyter TrueCare portal. So very happy to go through that kind of customization effort. The second part around how we identify that as an authorization. So we've actually built out an AI agent specifically to that portion of the prior authorization process. So we actually trained an AI agent on hundreds of these different faxes. Basically gave it a set of rules based on some clinician input on what are the typical identifiers used to identify a prior authorization request and what the type of prior authorization request is that's coming in. And so we fed all of that information into an AI agent that's then able to identify if a fax that comes in is in fact an authorization or not.
Oh, thanks. How does the clinical decisioning work with vendor solutions such as MCG, CWQI, which would be needed for downstream correspondence?
Avikar, do you want to start? I think Heather, you can jump in as well.
Yeah, so I can take that. So the way we've trained it right now is really just based on the type of data that we have access to. So certainly in the future, we would love to be able to handle that capability in conjunction with MCG or an interqual. But right now, we specifically don't have access to that data. We've used the data that we do have access to, which are the different kinds of internal company guidelines or basically what's provided to us by our clients. So right now, those are the decision trees that we do ingest. But certainly in the future, we would love to work with a vendor like that to continue this process.
Yeah, and for some of our payer clients, right, who use MCG and Intercall, so we are working on those partnerships, like Avikar mentioned, right, to make sure we are, pulling that in as well. So think of our platform as to we have this capability, right? As we start getting more and more of these integrations, we should be able to integrate with whatever guidelines that clients are looking for.
All right, thanks. The next one is the capabilities that were presented. How much is embedded within the current platform? Do we need to buy up? How long or difficult is it to train the AI capabilities to render high confidence recommendations to be explainable? And how long does it take to implement?
Okay, I can take that, but I might have to ask you to repeat some of the things if I missed anything. Yes, this is going to be all part of our next release of next-gen platform, right? So it would come with the TrueCare platform. For pricing specifically, we will work with individual clients to figure that out and customize it for them, because a lot of these things is last mile customizations, right? Like how many agents do they want and how much of the transactions are we automating? So it's a customized conversation that we would have with each of our clients. And then on the implementation methodology, so for a new client, the implementation methodology could be anywhere between 3 to 9 months, right? Depending on the complexity of requirements that we are looking at. And for existing clients, we might be able to migrate that within 3 months, right? Having said that, the implementation methodology that we are proposing is much broader than here's the platform, this is how technically you would migrate it, right? We are also helping them with the overall transformation, thinking about how do you want to redesign and reimagine your workflows to make sure you're really driving the outcomes that you're looking at. And also there's this huge change management and AI adoption that we also help work with our clients, right? This is a combination of upskilling folks on AI, but also building that trust and confidence in clinicians and our end users to begin using some of these things. And on the technical side, we will also, we have all of these pre-built agents, but we will work with your data set to tune the data so that it learns your data and your situations to make accurate recommendations. I think I answered all of the questions, Sherry.
I think you did. I think you did. Okay, the next one is, were these solutions built from scratch, and how long did it take to build this system?
I mean, I think we're a combination of Avikar, you and I, right? But I can start the higher level conversation. I think, so we've been evolving our current TrueCare platform over the last, I guess, 9+ months, right? To making that more modular, scalable, high performance architecture. And then we have this orchestration layer that we enable, and we are building agents with that. So most of these agents that we see we are building it from the scratch, right, over the last 9 months. And Avikar, you can talk about some of the specific agents and how long that took for us to build.
Yeah, so on the prior authorization side, so if we break that down, yeah, it's been about, I would say about 6 months of work on building out that entire continuum. It really varies based on the complexity of the workflow. So something like the fax intake, that takes a little bit shorter of a time, but the clinical review part, which requires a good amount of human judgment to be embedded into the process, gathering all the context around it, seeing all the different cases. That's a process that's taken a little bit more time. And it's something that's going to keep evolving too, as we work closer with clients and keep fine tuning that data. It's an ever evolving process, but yeah, all of this is kind of built from scratch over the last, I would say, about 6 months.
All right, thanks. Can you tell us what do bias audits look like?
Yeah, so we embed that into like our overall kind of governance framework. And I'd say there's really two parts of that. One is we do a number of statistical tests on the data that we have, or excuse me, on the data output that we get essentially once we've trained our models and started testing them. So it's really a statistical test, both kind of, using best of breed stat tests, but then also working with clients to understand, okay, how would you define bias in this setting? Right. So once we have that definition, we can then set up that statistical test to basically say, okay, we're looking for a certain threshold, or these are the certain definitions that you are looking to hit that define what bias looks like to you. So we'll do that both as part of our training steps as we've gotten, kind of the base case data, and we'll start running those statistical tests to basically say, okay, is there examples of bias or discrimination or any of that kind of stuff? Is a model out fair? But then also once we've deployed the model, we'll continue to kind of monitor those different statistics along with a number of other metrics, just to ensure that the model, there's no model drift, it's performing as we had mentioned, and that we can kind of tune things accordingly as well.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add to that is also we have a partnership with Carnegie Mellon University, right? And we are working with them to make sure we are bringing in the best practices in responsible AI. So all of our workflows that we are enabling, we want to make sure that we are embedding agents and human judgment to Avikar's point the right way. And, we are reaching out to the experts to making sure that, we are bringing in all of the latest thinking.
Thanks. Can you tell us how you train the model without access to MCG?
Yeah, so it's pretty much using the data that we can either is publicly available or provided to us by clients. So there's, outside of just MCG and Iroquois, we're able to gather other data, other sets of clinical guidelines, whether it's internal policies, basic stuff like that, or research reports, anything like that. We're able to kind of ingest into our AI models to basically generate those decision trees and then review again. So basically looking for data that's either publicly available or that existing clients were willing to share with us.
Thanks. And I have another question about data exposure. Can you talk about data exposure that the model will be trained on?
Yeah, so I guess it's really, based on, it varies client by client, but, ideally what we would want to get is historical data, both on, production level prior authorization faxes, associated clinical documents and medical history. And what we'd want to do is be able to kind of ingest all of that data, both on the fax intake side, so we understand the nuances of your prior authorization forms and kind of get an understanding of the different kinds of faxes that you receive within your organization, so that, we've kind of trained on all that data. And then to the extent that we can get historical, prior authorizations that have actually been adjudicated, so we can get an understanding of how your organization thinks about approving or denying different authorizations. We basically want to get all of that kind of production level data and basically tune that into our model.
Thanks. I've got a few more questions. I just want to remind the audience to keep typing in their questions in the Q&A box so we can get them to the team to answer. For a health plan interested in AI-driven efficiencies, but hopeful to avoid reductions in force, how do you see your AI-driven model having a positive impact?
Yeah, I can start, and Heather, I'm sure you would love to jump in as well. So cost savings, as you saw, right, is not the only outcome that we are going after, right? What we really want to emphasize is the solution that we are bringing forth is a combination of like, how do we enable, better clinical experience? How do we, reinforce payer-provider collaboration? So when we are working with our clients, we want to understand what their strategic objectives are and infusing that in designing the workflows for them. And productivity gains is huge, right? It need not always end up with, like staff reduction, right? It is how can we make time for care managers or clinicians to focus on what really matters more. So it's avoiding all of the admin grunt work to focus more on real important work. That's kind of how we see it.
Yeah, and I would just add to that also that, we are seeing that there is nursing shortages throughout the industry as well. So when we think about it, isn't uncommon for some of our partners to be able to struggle with getting those staff. So while it might, being able to leverage this AI can help with that staffing shortage. And really, as Sruthi mentioned, just really being able to allow those clinicians to focus on more, like work more at the top of their license.
Well, thanks. Can you explain how your AI capabilities are different from TrueCare?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the TrueCare platform can be standalone, right? And Symphony is a standalone platform. And with our next release, we are bringing in the power of TrueCare platform with layering Symphony on top of it. Having said that, Symphony standalone can integrate with any digital core. So if you are on a different UMCM platform, we are still going to work with you, right? And our Symphony platform can integrate on top of your platform, and we can enable those agentic AI capabilities. And we'll work with you to figure out like, how do we want to enable that user interface, right? Should it be something on top of your existing system, or can it be embedded within your system? That's a last mile conversation, but it's definitely something that can integrate with your existing UMCM platform. But even beyond that, across all of your, if, for example, you want to enable efficiency in claims, right? We can still enable a claim-specific workflow leveraging our Symphony platform.
Thanks. That kind of leads into this. Where can a health plan start with AI solutions, and what might be a good rollout or evaluation path of the solutions over time?
Yeah, I can take that. So certainly one path is working with us here at Zyter. Another one would be, I would always suggest kind of starting small and looking at a very specific use case that, right now, requires a good amount of manual work, or it's quite a costly process, and then kind of broaden out from there. The key with any kind of major use case that you try and tackle is that, humans have been doing this work for a long time. And really, in order for AI agents to be built properly, they have to be programmed to essentially understand all that context around the task. They need access to all the right data. They need to capture all the nuances around how humans have handled that task for like decades. And they need to have all the right feedback to keep improving. So a good rollout is essentially look at that overall process and then break it down into specific subtasks, and then really pick a subtask that you think is heavily manual where you want to add that efficiency. And you need the good amount of data that can be used to train. So then once you've gone through that process of really learning how to build out an AI agent for one of those subtasks, you then have that kind of knowledge base to say, okay, let me kind of broaden out from here and build out those additional subtasks. So, maybe just to bring that to life a little bit more, I mentioned how with the prior auth fax intake, we handle confirming that the fax is an authorization, we handle extracting all the key information, and then we handle mapping it to a UM portal. Each of those steps is actually a discrete substep for which we built specific agents, right? So we've built out, as I mentioned, a specific agent to handle verifying that a fax is an authorization. We also have an agent that's responsible for extracting the key information, which then talks to another agent to actually map that information to the Zyter UM portal. So again, we started off with looking at these specific subtasks within this overall continuum and then kind of broadened out from there.
I think you might have just answered some of this. Can you describe any of your implementations that leverage AI?
So I can take that, right? So we are working with a lot of clients to do, various pilots and POCs. Most of our existing clients who want to, switch to next gen. So it's different capabilities, and I can maybe talk about our implementation methodology also a little here, right? And the way that we set up with our clients who wants to do this is like, understanding what outcomes they really want to drive. And we do a global design leveraging our recode methodology to help them really think about what their current state workflows are and how we would want to reimagine the future state workflows, and really identifying what are the outcomes that they want to address. And we believe in understanding the value outcomes or measures that we want to deliver, right, and tracking it throughout our implementation. So we do that upfront, helping creating that workflow that drives outcomes, and then implementing it with the clients while doing model tunings, also change management and AI adoption.
Thanks. We have a couple more questions. Why do AI initiatives often disappoint or fail?
I can take that, and feel free to add, Avikar, Heather. So what we have seen typically is they try to automate, right, like to drive the outcomes, take the legacy existing process and try to automate it. And what we really emphasize is, if we are thinking about AI, you need to reimagine the work that you are really driving. So I think that's the first thing. And then second is, they underscore the importance of change management, especially in the context of you have this AI and that has mixed feelings among the people who are using it. So it's really important to not only have the executives align on the importance of AI or how we would want to enable it, but percolating it through the middle management and the frontline staffs to make them really understand and want to use AI, right? And then slowly training them on it. And then the third one is trying to use a generic AI and not customizing it for their context. So it's how do you create that workflow that we talked about, and how do you add those agents and tune it to your data set, your membership, your context. I think those are really critical in making sure AI initiatives are not just a cool thing that you're trying to do, but something that really drives sustainable, measurable values.
Yeah, I think Sruthi hit most of the key points. I think the only thing I would add to that is just really honing in on this point of being very clear around what the actual use case is and what the goal is of using AI. And I think one of the things that happens is the way we talk about AI right now is heavily focused on, what's going on with ChatGPT or all these different LLMs, right? And those LLMs are very well suited, obviously, for language-based tasks, but it's also important to define, I kind of think of it as like 4 different ways, right? There's a human doing it, there's automation, there's machine learning, and then there's large language models, right? And it's being very clear around, okay, what is the use case? And something that's language-based, maybe an LLM is really well suited for that task. But then there's also these other options, right? So something that I talked about is, certain authorizations can get automatically approved based on business rules, right? That's an example of automation that has been very successful over time, where maybe you don't necessarily need AI to replace that, but you have a way of AI kind of supplementing that with a summary or a recommendation or something like that, right? So it's being very clear on what the specific use case is and understanding what the nuances are around it, and then figuring out which of those kinds of categories are best suited to then help that specific workflow.
Yeah.
Hey.
Before the next question, just wanted to show you have our contact information on the screen right now. So if you are interested in learning more, how we can help you, feel free to contact us, and we're happy to work with you.
And I do have one final question that's actually pretty interesting. What are you doing to ensure AI is deployed and used responsibly?
Heather, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we're doing a lot of different things. So we're definitely doing those bias trainings. We're definitely doing change management with folks. We are surfacing that AI, the confidence score, as well as the clear rationale within the actual platform so that the clinicians can actually see that information. We're also setting up the governance. So really having that strict governance on the AI to ensure that the AI models that we're creating are done so in a responsible way. As I mentioned before, especially with healthcare, I think that's something that we definitely have to be really careful with. Just knowing the impact that some of the AI models can have. So that's why it's also really important for us to make sure that we're surfacing this information to the clinician. So keeping the clinician in the loop and ultimately having that final say to ensure that we're not making any incorrect decisions.
And I also wanted to call out, so one of our colleagues, Dr. Yoonghwa, he's a MD and PhD, recently did a study with Mayo Clinic in, how really enforcing transparency, explainability, and showcasing a confidence calibration can really ensure develop trust in clinicians, and the number of overrides really go down when we do that. So we are also working on our thought leadership and bringing all of that into our product. It's a evolving field, and we are trying to evolve with it, right, to make sure we are infusing our product and our methodology with the latest thinking.
All right, that was our last question. I want to really thank the Zyter team for today's presentation and actually fielding all of those questions. Great job. As a reminder, today's session has been recorded and will be posted along with the slide deck on the AI and Other Data Tools Showcase website. You can find the link under events on ACAP's main page. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.